r/ask Reddit. What is your "this person has no idea how the real world works" moment? Guy sold his Rent-A-Center TV and couldn't understand why they threatened to charge him for theft. Don't even rent TVs, period. If you can't afford a TV, you prob have more important things to deal with. I knew a guy who did this for a PS3. Pay £30 a month for 36 months and it's yours. Comes to over 4 times what one would cost him if he saved. One of my friends tried to get an Xbox 360 from Rent-A-Center. He used me as a reference and told them I was his former boss. When they called me up, I was surprised they actually checked his references. I just shit-talked him with mostly true and some made up stories about him. He didn't get approved, and that's one of the best favors I've ever done for him. First day at college. Girl next to me raising her hand and waiting for the RA to call on her asks what time will the cleaning services be cleaning our rooms. Man, did she make me feel better. I was poor and got a scholarship. I was so stressed I'd do something stupid first, but she totally jumped on that fire for me. I've met this kind of people before, but in high school. Guy was rich and a lady would come and clean, wash clothes and refill napkin containers, water bottles, etc. One time she got sick and was absent for a few days of the week. Man, could you tell just by looking at the piles of clothes and trash everywhere? I kid you not. There were a pair of jeans with underwear inside them on the living room. The only place of the house I entered. Some of these rich guys depend so much on room service. This kid at my school thought taxes weren't real and just a story. The tax fairy. I've dedicated my life to finding its nest. A vicious beast of a fairy that eludes my capture at every turn. Recently started a new job and a college graduate was in my orientation class. Confused about income tax, but straight up blown away she had to pay into social security. Something along the lines of, I thought the government paid for that. She didn't even know what job she was hired for because her father handled all the application stuff. Met a guy at uni who thought Chinese people would be unaffected by the rise of superbugs because they were too smart to fall victim to it. Both a pharmacy student and a Chinese person could not convince him otherwise. That's an odd reason, like they were too smart and they would implement policies, treatments or something. Did he just straight up think that because of intelligence the bugs wouldn't affect them? Yep, you need con to boost those fort saves. I was in the army with someone who wanted to know when the maids came to do laundry in basic training. I was in the Air Force. We didn't have maids in basic, but we turned in our laundry once a week. Our uniforms came back cleaned and pressed, but we had to fold everything else. We also had to make sure to get all the dry cleaning tags off our uniforms or the TIs would get pissed. I was in the army. During basic we did our own laundry. We had the option to have our uniforms cleaned pressed once a week, but we had to pay for it. Roughly 50% of the time the uniforms would come back with stains or broken zippers. You know, I can't remember if we had to pay for it or not, but the work was always on point. Damage of any kind was rare, but it was reported and fixed immediately. I was in the Marine Corps. We had to do our own laundry and weren't allowed to until lights out at 8. So spending 2 hours doing laundry, then an hour roving patrol, then waking up at 4. I probably averaged 4 hours of sleep a night for 3 months. Good times. My cousin and I were talking one day and I mentioned that I had a horrible sense of direction, where my brother could be dropped off in a cornfield and find his way home. She replied that it was easy to find your direction. Just remember, never eat shredded wheat and you will know where north is. I laughed and said that was for remembering the directions in order, not for finding which way was which. We argued for 20 minutes till I told her to show me how it works. She stands up and points forward and says never eat shredded wheat, and points to the direction she was facing when she stood up. That's north. So I told her to face me and then find north. She does it again. Never eat shredded wheat, and points at me and says that's north. So ask her if north just changed. She says no, but north was that way a minute ago. She looks confused and says why didn't that work? I told her it was because she was an idiot. When I sold my first car, the guy who bought it from me got it for his son, who was on his 5th car. He'd had his license for less than 2 years, and they weren't a wealthy family. He had to keep buying cheaper and cheaper cars each time. I'd heard it through the grapevine that he had crashed my old car too. My brother wanted to be a game designer. I asked how that was going and what he had been doing. Mom had gone to Walmart to pick up some art supplies so he could get designing. He did not really know what coding was in terms of game design, and did not know graphic design. He thought he could simply just draw up some swords and guns and shields and someone would pay him to do this for a living. With zero experience. He's almost 30. While reading this, I was thinking, oh, that's cute. He sounds like my son. Then I got to the end. My son is 6. Lumfeo, I read that whole thing thinking he was like 15. Mildly understandable at 15. School doesn't tell you what jobs require. Air Force. 18-year-old arrives at his first duty station. He has contacted nobody. Nobody knows he is arriving today. He has figured out, by stopping at different offices and asking, where our warehouse is, and enters the office to meet his supervision, flanked by his girlfriend and his mother. Later on, it is discovered that he fudged his numbers on all his previous fitness tests to that point, which is why he could barely do 25 push-ups and couldn't run to save his life. Even later on, becomes hysterical, sobbing, panicking, begging and pleading when told he will deploy to Afghanistan, like everyone else in the squadron had been doing for years. This was 2012. We were logistics. We literally loaded airplanes all day. A guy turned up day 1 of my basic training, claimed he made a mistake, refused his uniform and cried for like 2 hours straight. They let him go as unfit for army service, which is probably a load better for them than having the guy whinging about for the mandatory 28 days before you can leave. This is the kind of guy who shows up at parties and talks about his time in the service. My sister-in-law got in an argument with her brother/my husband and me, stopped speaking to us, blocked us on Facebook, and then threatened to sue us for visitation rights to our 6-month-old. Maybe I'm just game for a good fight, but I'd have been like, do it, just to see the local judge laugh his butt off. It would have been kind of fun to go on Judge Judy so Judy could bark, "That's not your baby, go home." But in reality I wouldn't want to spend the time and money dealing with that nonsense. That sounds like something my mother would do, assuming we had kids and could afford to move out of her house. Help me, I'm in an endless hell. I'm attending grad school in Barcelona, and there are these 2 Colombian girls in my class who I'm pretty sure have never had to work for anything in life. We just had our first final the other day, and while the test was hard I thought it was pretty straightforward. It was essay type questions and you needed to draw on things we discussed in class to answer each question. A few minutes into the exam, one of the girl raises her hand and says she doesn't know what to do. Fair enough. The professor tells her to use class theories to answer the question asked. She then said that she doesn't know how to relate any class theories to the question. I was literally sitting there, having already answered one question, having used 4 or 5 different class topics to answer it. I couldn't understand why she was having such a hard time. The other Colombian girl then says, "Can you just write on the board which theories you want us to use to answer?" She basically asked the professor of a grad school class to answer a question for her. The professor then goes a bit too far and gives her a few clues. 20 minutes later she raises her hand and once again asks, "Can you read what I wrote and tell me if I'm right or should I do it again?" In grad school? Oh, my brain rerouted to thinking it was for undergrad because that made way more sense. My dad asked if he could borrow my cat. I said no. He replied, "It's okay. I'll just rent one." I didn't point out that cat rentals aren't a thing. I still don't know why he needed a cat. Maybe he had a cat in the wall and wanted to get it out. Cat in the wall, eh? Now you're talking my language. Cats do not abide by the rules of physics. You don't know shit about cats. I was stunned to how many people after school just expect to instantly get hired to great position with great money. I met my classmate 3 years later still jobless saying, "LOL, I finished school, I won't accept job under XXX, am I crazy?" I knew he had no idea how anything works. Dude, I know a guy who was doing his placement year at uni, never worked in the industry before, and he refused to apply for jobs that didn't pay him over XXX amount. But the only jobs that would pay him that much were a few hours away. Long story short, he didn't get many interviews for posts, and the ones he did, he couldn't afford to attend the interview because poor student. He ended up dropping out because he couldn't fulfill the requirements of the course. I teach at a tech boot camp. We were talking about career options the other day when a student, who, remember, has about a month of training and zero job experience in this field, was like, I watched her talk the other day by someone called a strategist. I'm not sure what that title means, but they said they made $250,000. So I want to be a strategist. That person got paid that money because they have 15 years of experience, not because of their title. Slow your roll. You're not going to find an ad on Indeed looking to spend 6 figures on a strategist with no experience. I heard that a CEO makes even more money. How do I find an entry-level position as a CEO? There was this girl at uni. Everybody was in awe whenever she talked. She didn't believe in taxes and earthquakes. Also, studying to be a social worker, she said, I don't like working with retards because I can't stop laughing at them. A real angel. How do you not believe in earthquakes? Live in a part of the world where there are none. In my life I've experienced maybe 5, and I know people who live further away from fault lines than I told my friend that I was saving up to get my bathroom remodeled, and she said to me, what, still? It's been 2 months. Yes dear, but I have to pay my bills, mortgage, travel, food, whatever else I may need. She lives at home with her parents still and doesn't have to pay any bills, rent to stay there. She's in for a shock when she moves out. They lived with a dark bedroom for 7 days waiting for the real estate of their rental property to come and change the light bulb. My ex-wife's roof on her house was damaged from a storm. The roofing company wanted $1,700 up front to fix it. The insurance company sent her a check for $700. They would send a check for the rest when the job was complete. They sent her that little because she chose a $1,000 deductible. In anger she sent the check back. Several years later, out of curiosity, I looked up her name on that website that shows if you have outstanding payments coming to you, and she does. I thought about contacting her and letting her know, but meh. She doesn't understand the deductible. $700 is $700. Sounds like the insurance company was all good with the claim. 2. Was good friends with this girl in college. I knew she was spoiled, free reign of daddy's credit card, but it was never a big deal. After college she couldn't grasp why I couldn't spend the next 6-12 months backpacking through Europe with her, which she wanted to do because she didn't feel like getting a job yet. The idea that I had to get a job to support myself and start paying back student loans was completely foreign to her. Her answer to everything was, have your parents pay for it. Sorry honey, that is not how the real world works. You shouldn't gotten a free trip out of the deal and told her to have her parents pay for your loans and trip fees. My little brother, who was, and I fear still kinda is, adamant that he would grow up to be an actor all through high school without trying to pursue any acting related things. Quit drama club freshman year and never looked back. Didn't work towards getting into an acting program in college. Spent more time on his video games than acting. But I guess he was just banking on being discovered and put into roles due to handsomeness. It's hard enough to make that dream work for people who are actually trying. I had a classmate who prayed God would find him a role without him auditioning for anything. I pointed out that if he wanted something he had to work for it and put his name out there. He was not pleased. I worked on a group project with these 2 girls in high school. We had met up at a library over the weekend, and when I pulled into the parking lot, one of them said something about my car. I said, yeah, I love this car, but someone keyed it in a parking lot all down the passenger side. Look how deep it is. I told her I couldn't fix it beyond some touch-up paint either because that would require sanding it down and all that. She looked me dead in the eye with a look like I was crazy and said, well, why don't you go buy some elbow grease? I hear that fixes everything. Dead serious. Girl had heard about Just Give It Some Elbow Grease and got it into her head that this was a product you could buy to fix just about anything. She did not contribute much to our group project. While I feel sorry for you and your car, that is ducking hilarious. I had a classmate in 5th grade who had very strict parents. They wouldn't let her eat food that wasn't organic. Wouldn't let her watch non-educational TV. Wouldn't let her stay past 8 p.m. Wouldn't let her watch movies that are above G rating. Wouldn't let her play any form of sports or video games. And wouldn't let her go on field trips unless one parent is present. Towards the end of the year, She got chickenpox. Why, you ask? Well, it's because her parents didn't vaccinate her. Every time someone tries to tell me about some natural cure for cancer or other health problem, friend of mine thinks paying taxes is to control the people. Instead of paying taxes, people should just get together and pay collectively for the infrastructure they will use, so they don't have to pay for things they won't use. But paying collectively for the infrastructure that we use is taxes. One of the candidates for the Mexican presidency is proposing giving all farmers and everyone in the countryside a smartphone and a tablet. The thing is, in those areas there is no electricity and no internet. There isn't even proper plumbing. But smartphones and tablets sound good. A friend from college recently told me that he got a car, his first one. I was pretty happy for him and asked what he was going to do now. The conversation went like this. Him. Dunno man. Mab, I go upset to see the sights. Me. Sounds cool. But what are you going to do about gas? Him. What do you mean? Me. You don't have a job and your parents aren't giving that good of an allowance. So what will you do if your car runs out of gas? I swear to God this is what he said. Him. Oh, that's no problem. All I gotta do is find a pipeline in my backyard, dig it up, get the oil from it, put them into buckets, and leave them in my trunk for when I need to refill the tank. I then awkwardly stared him down for a good minute, his innocent blue eyes piercing my soul, and told him I had to go. A bucket of gas in the back of a truck sounds like a good idea. He could also sell it door to door when the value picks up again, unless some wild card cuts his brakes. This one guy bought a used motorcycle without getting the title transferred. Worst, the seller refused to get the title notarized because he doesn't trust the government. My mother asked my wife's family if they want to go overseas with them next week, as in a week. Can you schedule off work, make hotel reservations, and pay for it all within a week? In case it wasn't obvious, my family is much more well off than my wife's. Last year, I got a job offer, which required a move. I found a place, which required first and last as a deposit. Not unusual. Unfortunately, I had been unemployed for the most of a year prior to this, and didn't have enough money to cover 2 months rent up front, about 1,500 euros, as well as survive in the city for a month before I got my first paycheck. So I asked my parents for help, which sucked but had to be done. They flipped the duck out at me, because they genuinely thought that was too much and was more like a deposit to buy a house. I spent many nights explaining to them that the modern world is not like it was in the 70s but to avail. They now want me to put a deposit on a house. When I said I can't afford that, because I can't, they said it wasn't a big deal. Just get a 100% mortgage from the bank and pay it off over time. A guy I know once said, I don't get homeless people, just buy a house. He is a spoiled rich kid who has no idea how money works, never had a job, never done any hard work in his life and is barely scraping through university. My ex-girlfriend was really guilty of this. We dated all through college and didn't really understand the extent of which taxes are taken out of a paycheck. She also had an expectation that everyone also made 70-80k coming out of college. So with this reasoning she expected to live a lavish lifestyle as soon as she finished her degree. There's a reason she's my ex. One time I made the mistake of trying to do laundry in my dorm's laundry room during parents' weekend. I walked in to see rows of haggard looking mothers with massive bags of their children's clothes. Laundry is free at our school, and the machines are ridiculously simple to use. One of my friends is still mystified by taxes and gets his parents to do them for him. He's 32 and single. I hope to high heaven some smart lady finds him attractive. My cousin played Xbox 12 hours a day, which some Americans. He thought he was in a clan and the Americans told him when he was 16 they would fly him out and they would all live in a house together and make COD trick-shooting videos. He was 14 at the time and absolutely delusional. He never went to America. I encounter at least one per day. This morning was about mortgages. This woman was talking about moving to FL soon and putting her house on the market. I'm a first-time home buyer in my 20s, interested in buying something modest. She nonchalantly says that they'll probably ask for about 300k just to break even and move. I said yeah, that's way out of my price range, which is more like 180k. She is very confused and says that if I don't have a bunch of bills that should be very affordable for me. I ask her how much she thinks that monthly payment would be and she says maybe 2k. I say yeah, at least. Plus homeowners insurance, car insurance, car payment, gas, healthcare, phone bill, water bill, electric bill, internet bill, groceries, 401k, etc. on single income. I'm lucky to have a job with good benefits, and I'm aware of that, but I'm far from making six figures. The fact is, this woman works as a cafeteria cashier and married into money, and she's absolutely clueless about budgeting, even in her 50s. I'm in my early 30s and just doing grad school now. I'm one of the oldest people in my class. The majority are straight out of undergrad or at most 1-2 years of work experience. The class I recently took is a study of what causes military conflict between nations. Pretty interesting class with a professor who obviously knows his shit. This one girl would always go out of her way to make sure we all knew her opinion on every matter. She majored in international relations at a good undergrad school, took one study abroad trip to France, and thought she knew the answer to all the world's political problems. She would constantly use buzzwords and nonsensical jargon to essentially argue that the only reason we have wars is because women are not in charge. We all did our best to ignore her, but sometimes she would say such stupidly ignorant things that people would go off on her. She is a prime example of somebody who read a theory once in some chapter and thought that she knew what was best for an international system of politics that has been developing over the last few centuries. There's currently a pregnant girl, 19, at work. She cried actual tears because they made her work in the kitchen. That's literally half of her job. She thinks they're not going to fire her. They are so going to fire her. I mentioned the pregnant thing because she only wants to sit at work. It's not a sitting job. I get it. I've got 4 kids. Pregnancy is not the most fun thing ever, but you actually have to work at a job. She's just so young for her age and has definitely been spoiled up to this point. Now she's going to be a single mom. Life is going to beat the hell out of her. I think she'll come out of it and hopefully be a much stronger adult afterwards though. She just has a lot of growing up to do. I worked with a girl who took so much leave at work, her balance got down to 0 hours. Then, she was shocked when they wouldn't loan her hours that she could pay back over the next few pay periods. Not sick leave, just leave. A roommate I lived with during university for 4 months never used the kitchen at all. She always went to restaurants or got takeout for lunch and dinner. On our last night she wanted to make cupcakes to take for the last day of her co-op job, and I had walk her through making cupcakes from a Betty Crocker boxed cake mix. Her first question was, how do I preheat the oven? My parents asked me if I have a sort of agreement roommate contract with my flatmates, because the nerdy guys on The Big Bang Theory have one, and that's the closest they have been to living in a house that wasn't owned by them or their families. We're hiring and I've just received an email from this guy. Says he heard about the job, the position, and duration. It's a contract position. That's it. No questions. No follow-up. No here's my number. Not even an attached CV. I don't even know where to begin. For all we know, he could be the most talented guy in the industry, but our fast-paced and constantly stressed out team might kill him before he could demonstrate his skills. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.